Thanks, Mr. Sharif. Now I'll open up the floor for questions and comments. Please can you keep your comments brief and to the point. Gentlemen,
Is belief in God the easy answer? I mean, people used to say the world was flat, but this was just based on a lack of knowledge. You're saying God exists because we don't know where the universe came from. But can you argue that's just based on a lack of knowledge of physics?
Okay.
Isn't God the easy answer? I don't know, God did it.
I don't think that's what I said, and I hope that that's not the impression that I gave. What I said is that everything limited is dependent. The question becomes, does the limited depend upon another limited thing, or does it depend upon unlimited? In reality, if we look at it from science point of view, they have to justify that something is unlimited, or something is independent or eternal, as they would say. For instance, the first law of thermodynamics states energy cannot be created or destroyed but transforms from one form to another. So what they do is they establish the independency or the eternality to energy. But what we say is that energy is limited. How is it limited? E equals mc squared. It's limited by definition. Because it's limited by definition, we can't term it as eternal. So therefore, scientists or physicists or quantum mechanics, they are looking for something which is independent. What we're saying is that if it's independent, it has to be unlimited in all its attributes, not in one of its attributes. And that's what we come towards. That's the conclusion.
Could I make a little point?
yeah, fine.
I'd just like to bring up to date about the big crunch, as the speaker mentioned. The latest information, as I understand it, from the WMAP satellite, I think that's what it's called, is that there is not likely to be a big crunch, that the universe is in fact flat, and so that means that it will go on expanding until it becomes so diffuse that it sort of disappears into the void again, from whence it began.
That's right. And that doesn't disprove the correct.
Okay, next question. The woman there, like it. No, you.
Your argument that you said that you believe in reason, and you said that we can't find God because we depend on our belief in God through emotion and through, like, faith is not a matter of emotion, it's a matter of reason. But reason, who created reason? I mean, reason is something that we as human beings created. We developed through knowledge, through experience. Our mental capacities are not something we are born with. Our mental capacities are something we acquire through experience, through knowledge, through education. How can we believe in something we ourselves created? How can we believe in something we developed through our own experience? I think reason, it's a way for something we can use to achieve something, to achieve God, to achieve something to believe in. It has nothing only with Muslims. I mean, I am Muslim, but I'm saying something about other religions in the world. I mean, like Samuel Pickett in the 19th century in Waiting for Godot, which is a very important play, he said that people after the Second World War, they were fighting, that reason doesn't give them justification for the world. After the Second World War, reason didn't give the human being, any justification. So it's nothing to do with Muslim people. No, it has to do with the human being. It's the dilemma of a human being that reason cannot justify everything. And we can't believe in God as a human being or a superpower or a person, because we need God to be absolute, to be something which is beyond the human being. Who created the human beings should be something better than a human being, should be something absolute, should be something abstract and have superpower, which we cannot concretize, which reason cannot help us to achieve. But when we want to believe, we use reason to reach God. We don't use emotions, and we cannot separate emotions and reasons from each other, because human beings are mind and body, emotions and reason.
Thanks.
The speaker was saying.
Can everyone calm down, please?
The speaker was saying that she wanted to believe in God. And what is that? But emotion.
No, it's not a matter of believing God. I mean, let's alone that it's a matter of believing God. We are talking about your argument. You argue that we don't believe in God because, or you say that you believe in reason. You believe in reason because.
Well, I said everyone has to
Please
believe.
get another two-way conversation.
Everyone
If
has
you
to
want
believe
to
in
make a comment, just raise your hand and then I'll pick you.
Yeah. Okay. So just you said that. I'm just.
Reason is just the basic way
What
by
is
which we
reason?
live
Who
our daily
created
lives.
reason?
Let's move on to the next question.
Sorry.
I think you want to make a comment on this.
Okay. Can you just if you say that reason is.
Inshallah, I'll try to answer the points here and raise it, and perhaps if you want to discuss it further, you can come up afterwards.
Yeah, we can't give absolute like facts with words without knowing what are they meaning.
Agreed.
Just analyze them.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I think what it is that we have to understand certain things, which is that reason, right, cannot justify everything because there's limit to the role of the mind. That's why I gave the example of the painting. You see the painting, and you know that painter exists, but you don't know what colour hair, whether it's a male or a female, what the colour eyes was. You can't sense the essence of the painter, but you can sense the existence of the painter. And this is exactly what we're using in regards to the proof of God argument. We're saying that you can't sense the essence of what it means that God is all-powerful, fundamentally, but you can sense that an all-powerful creator exists. Yeah? So this is very important. And also one thing which is very important is that we shouldn't be defensive when it comes to people who believe in the Creator. We should be people who understand that, look, at the end of the day, we have a rational justification for our belief. And really, if we look at the reality of secularism, secularism was born out of a troublesome conflict-filled Europe. It was when the church suppressed any thinking and suppressed any scientific advancement that was taking place in the name that this is contradicting scripture and contradicting doctrine. So you found certain people like Galileo was prevented from publishing his research in terms of seeing more than the 7 heavenly bodies. Or you found that certain people, they start to speak out against the corruption of the authoritarian manner by which the church was being established. So a group of thinkers reacted to the current climate. There wasn't thinking involved in it. I'll give you an example of this. If you really understand and appreciate secularism, you can't be a theist secularist. You can't be somebody who believes that a creator exists and yet at the same time believes that the creator has no right to influence life's affairs. And to be an atheist, you can't be a person who accepts anyone who does not have, who proclaims a religious belief until they say religion is only for your individual affairs. So you find that they never actually fundamentally answered the question. They left it up in the air. And in fact, Jean-Jacques Rousseau was a person who really cemented this point by saying that, look, at the end of the day, whether God exists or not, it's just your personal relationship to God, and so therefore don't let it influence how you live your life, which is fundamentally antithesis to reason. In fact, Rousseau was known as a romantic or romanticism movement, which was basically building your thoughts upon emotions, really. And this person became the basis from which liberal secular society is now established through his books like Social Contract.
Thanks. Just want to make a point. If you ask a question or make a comment, keep it brief. And if you only make a comment about thinking.
First, can you speak up, please? Sorry?
I'll repeat
Sure.
your
Yeah, with the, you said like the painter paints a painting, but surely the painter can be dead and the painter is still there. You see what I mean? So therefore, does your whole theory suggest that God might not still exist? He might not have existed back then. Started off the whole process, not exist now. Yeah.
Just to repeat the question, you're saying, could God have existed and created the universe and then died?
And he's right with regards to the analogy of the painting, is that the painter could be dead. But my point about the painting was not to say that the guy was alive. My point was that the fact that you have the material of colours, of the canvas, of the frame, does not mean you have a painting. You need something outside, external to it to make the painting. And that means there needs to be something like a human being to paint it. When we come, and we went through the argument, through the proof of God, through the issue that everything is limited and dependent, then what we came to is that either something is dependent upon limited, or is dependent upon something unlimited. If it's dependent upon limited, it's either through infinite regression, which can't exist, or it's through, like the water cycle, cyclical dependency, which we said would mean that nothing exists. So therefore it has to be dependent upon unlimited. If we say unlimited, what we mean is it is beyond the concept of beginning and end, really. Because once you start talking about beginning and end, you're talking about limitations. And so it's not unlimited, it's limited. And so therefore this does not fit within our definition of what a creator is.
Okay, gentleman there right at the back with his hand up.
Can you define, for me, can you define either the creator, the man who painted the painting, or your version of unlimited?
Okay, I think everyone heard that.
Okay, we define it by saying it's undefinable. That's the point. So therefore, we understand that something has to be independent. Yes or no? You understand this point? That has to be.
So what you're saying is, it's indefinable. So there is nothing. It don't exist.
Well, actually, I'll give you an example of this. I'll give you an example of this. At the moment, quantum mechanics or quantum physics talks about the singularity before the universe existed, or just before Planck's time. And it talks about that that particular point in time was beyond any defined laws. So in terms of science, there's a precedence for this. It's not the case that when we talk about things which is beyond definition or undefinable, then that's definitely the case, or that's been mentioned by people like Stephen Hawking. What we're saying is that if it is undefinable or unlimited, let's make it unlimited in all its aspects, not unlimited in one, unlimited in another, because that's what we term a paradox, a contradictory statement. Now, in terms of how do we understand the essence of the Creator, then my mind is limited, so how can my limited mind know the essence of the Creator? That would, if I was to try and visualize the Creator in my mind, which obviously is not allowed for the Muslims, but if I was to do that, then my imagination would be limited. Yeah, so therefore I'd be limiting the Creator. So this is why we don't go into those types of discussions. So there is a precedence to talk about undefinables in terms of quantum mechanics. There is precedence to talk about the fact that energy is independent, or sorry, is eternal, and these types of things.
Okay, you had a second point.
Yes.
Then everyone keep quiet, please.
With religion, you said that it's basically a form of collective delusion. Basically, people imagine it and therefore believe it's sort of compelling cycle. Couldn't secularism be a collective delusion, just in the same way?
No, because secularism or rationalism is the basis of belief for everyone. Everyone is basically a secularist, because they have to start somewhere. That is where they start. We just don't add on the extra beliefs about gods and superstition and so on.
Can I respond to that question?
Can I respond to that?
I think the reality is this, is that, and this is my position on this, is that secularism is pretty much a religion, and it's pretty much emotionally based. For instance, let's ask a question. What is the basis upon determining what's right and wrong? And this is a very fundamental question. Well, I don't harm another person. Well, why is harming another person wrong? Well, I wouldn't like it harmed upon myself. So you're saying the basis of right and wrong is whether you like it or don't like it. So it becomes subjective. And this is where we're falling into the trap that George Ellis has mentioned that people of religion fall into. Another point which is this, is that the reason why secularism developed was on the notion that there are no true right, wrong and rights. There are no absolute morality. because there's no absolute morality, we should not have one person morally dictate the actions of another person. This is what secularism said. So secularism said, yes, the mind's not going to be able to understand this, so we'll compromise. And we'll say the majority will becomes law. And then the problems became, what if the majority now oppresses the minority? What do you do in that situation? So it became flawed in terms of contradictions. And really that's what we see. I'll give you an example of this. There is a case in which a mother had a premature baby. I don't know if you heard about it. 26-week-old premature baby. She wants to maintain the care of that baby at hospital. But the doctors have said that baby, if it dies or if it goes into arrest, will not resuscitate it, will not try to bring it back. And the parents are saying, no, we want you to do as much as you can. Who's right and who's wrong? You can't really actually determine who's right and who's wrong. It's morally subjective. And that is the basis of secularism, which is moral subjectivism.
Could I say that that is a very extreme case, and that in that case it probably is true that it's subjective. Difficult cases don't make good law, and there are general principles of morality that do exist and that are perfectly rational. It depends on us. We live in together, so the thing is not to annoy people unnecessarily. Be kind to people, and so on. These are straightforward things. It just require a little bit of thinking.
Yeah, could I just see, when we use the word be kind to people, be nice, you know, there's a statement that comes, or the saying that comes to my mind when I was a little kid. I used to always hear it, you know, one man's meat is another man's poison, which is basically saying that in terms of what you see as kind, what you see as morally good, another person will see as morally bad, as morally evil. And there's many, many examples of this, not just one example. So I'll give you the example of paedophilia. Everybody says paedophilia is wrong. But what is the age of consent of paedophilia? Or what is the age of consent by which two people can come together? In this country it's 16, between male and female. Between male and male it's 18, discrepancy. In Canada it's 18. In Italy it's 14. In Spain and Sweden you're looking at the age of 12. In New Zealand, they have an age of consent between a man and a woman, but not between a woman and a boy. In Mexico, there is no age of consent. So in terms of what is morally right and morally wrong, we find that that becomes very hazy. And there's many examples of this. Look at the war in Iraq. Was it morally right? For Bush it was. For Tony Blair it was. Was it morally wrong? For the rest of the world it wasn't. So there's so subjectivism in terms of the judgment and the view. And to be honest, I'll be honest, I could argue the basis of the war in Iraq was right and wrong from both bases. Not without, and show it to you that the war in Iraq was right morally, and also show the war in Iraq was also wrong morally. So it's it just shows you the nature of the fact that it's so relative in terms of knowing what's right.
Okay, next question.
If there's a God, how can a God allow people to go through so much suffering? Surely a God can't exist that can allow a fellow human to suffer so much.
Just to repeat the question, you're saying if a God existed, how can he allow so much suffering in the world, like the starvation in Africa, like the killing of people around the world?
Yeah. I think it's a good question. It's an important question that a lot of people ask. But really, if you look at my presentation, I did not talk about morality. So I didn't go through the argument that everything is hunky-dory, fine, is excellent, and that this is what life's all about. Nor did I touch upon the essence of what it means for the creator, what the essence of the creator is. So, for instance, some people, they say God is all good and God is all powerful. So why is there evil? And this shows that there is contradiction in the world, contradiction in the notion of belief in God. The way we look at it is that the Creator, in terms of being good, cannot be understood from the mind, because it's not something we can sense. I prove the Creator from what I can see, from the presentation, from electricity, from generators, from stars, from suns, from nebulas. But I can't make a judgment based on what I can't see. like the essence of what is good and bad. That is only what we would say as Muslims for the Creator. And we believe as Muslims is that the point or the facing of tests is neither good nor bad. It just shows whether a person has the strength to overcome those tests. And therefore, we have the ability to rely upon God or to rely upon the Creator to reward us for overcoming those troublesome times. And that gives us an emotional satisfaction or an emotional level, in essence an emotional crutch that helps us along when we face trouble and problematic times, without actually answering what is good and bad.
Okay, a woman there with the white top, rather had
This is a question to Gert. You say that faith is irrational, which I would believe is a very big generalization, because to me, faith is just seeing what's around you, having the faith and trusting that things will be better. And you talked about Voltaire, and I think you would agree that Voltaire in his book Candide also agreed to that, because he said that all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. He believed that things would eventually get better, or that everything is as best as it can.
Well, I'm afraid he didn't believe that, because that was a satire. It was a satire, a well-known satire. He was taking off.
On why faith is irrational. I don't know why you have to say that.
Voltaire was taking off the philosophy that he was supposed to be attributed to Leibniz about it being the world being the best of all possible worlds. But,
okay, we'll move on to the next question. Gentleman there, the black robe.
Yeah, the Bible and probably the Quran, I haven't read it myself, so it has a lot of what it claims to be facts, things like the fact that the world was created maybe 10,000 years ago, and that we didn't evolve from other creatures such as apes, but we were just created. Some people say that this should be taken metaphorically, and others obviously maybe with salt and literally. What would you say to that? What would you say to people who would take it literally if that's not what you should mean?
Okay. If we look at the issue of whether what does the Quran say, because I can't really comment upon the Bible, but in terms of the Quran does not give any time limits in terms of whether it was 15 billion years, which is what current science says at the beginning of the universe, or whether it was, maybe longer than that, or maybe shorter than that. So Islam does not really go for that. Islam does not really go through the realities of, how creation came about. So it doesn't discuss this issue. But for Muslims, we don't believe in evolution. And that's really from 2 points of view. Firstly, is that evolution in origin is not something which is science. And it may sound, well, I was told, my biology teacher told me that it is science. Yeah? That's why I studied it, that's why I had to learn it and do it for my A-levels and GCSEs. But the reality is that if it's science, you need to test it and verify. Remember the methodology. Now, the basis of evolution is observation on qualitative analysis. You look at bones and you make a subjective assumption about those bones looking like other bones. Now, because it doesn't fit within the scientific empirical framework, Muslims will reject it on that basis. We can't accept it. And really, to be honest, there's many other problems or other discrepancies in regards to that. For example, I've got a quote here by Richard Fortray. He talked about in the magazine called Science, volume 293, which is July 2001. He talked about the Cambrian explosion exploded. He said the differential evolution and dispersal too must have required a previous history of a group for which there is no fossil records. Furthermore, cladistic analysis of arthropodic phylogeny revealed that trilobites, like others, are fairly advanced twigs on the arthropod tree, but fossils of these alleged ancestral arthropods, i.e. what comes before these, are lacking. That's what he said. Even if evidence for an earlier origin is discovered, it remains a challenge to explain why so many animals should have increased in size and acquired shells within a short period of time at the base of the Cambrian period. Even if you look at, just one more thing, even when Richard Dawkins, a very famous evolutionist, mentions in his book called The Blind Watchmaker, he goes, and we find many of them, I talk about the Cambrian period, found many of them already in an advanced state of evolution the very first time they appeared. It is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history. And I just want to maybe touch upon one other thing, which is that from Darwin's theory, it evolved to include genes and through the discovery of DNA. And therefore, let's call it Neo-Darwinism. Now, Neo-Darwinism has also changed. So there is a new theory called punctualism, expounded by Miller, in which he basically says that an animal for millions and millions of years will be the same, and then over a very, very short period of time will it change from one form to another. So what we find is that, okay, let's look at it from the scientific point of view, because we've not established the Quran is the word of Allah, or the Bible is the word of Allah. That may be a future debate or discussion. I'm trying to plug myself back in again. And but from the science point of view, there is lacking evidence. There's many holes. Yeah?
Gentleman there who asked a question.
You talked about bones and things and fossils. You talked about bones, fossils, and how there's gaps in the record. But I mean, that's just how it goes. You do end up missing skeletons and things because you can't find examples of everything. But the one thing you really did miss out though was genetics. There is genetic proof, if you wish, that mankind evolved from apes, from monkeys. There is, the whole evolutionary tree is completely, it's there in everyone's genes, in all animals. It's traced right back. I mean, it can't really be disputed.
Okay.
That's the problem. Evolution is a fact.
Right. If we really look at when we in terms of facts or in terms of science, let's be very specific. It has to be testable, it has to be observable, it has to be repeatable. That's science. So now we have certain things which we can test, which we can repeat, which we can observe. For instance, we can look at E. coli, Escherichia coli, which is a bacteria which has a reproduction rate of 1 in every 20 minutes. So it reproduces every 20 minutes. Therefore, we have seen over 40-year period, it's being exposed to radiation, heat, light, different forms of extremities of the environment, which is equivalent of looking at a mammalian species for 100 million years, and yet we haven't seen any evolution. Colon bacillus, which is another bacteria which undergoes huge mutations, hasn't changed from 250 million years ago when it was first discovered. We find that when we start talking about DNA, then we start talking about how does DNA mutate and cause evolution in terms of that. We understand from science definitely that mutations in genes occur, but there was termed as point mutations, meaning at a certain nucleotide, 1 or 2 nucleotides, there is a change in the DNA structure. But then you don't find, in nature, we've not found yet, and I've actually studied this issue of biology at university, when we don't find yet that in terms of mutations, do you get additions of nucleotides to DNA? And even if you take the question back further, and where did the first amino acids come from? Or where did the first nucleotides come from? There was a person called Stanley Miller. He did an experiment. And Stanley Miller, what he did was, he basically had a particular laboratory, set certain conditions which he presumed were the conditions of the primordial earth, in order to show that amino acids, which is the building blocks of DNA. In essence, it's like discovering or trying to see if a brick in the Great Wall of China can be made by chance. Yeah? And therefore can the Great Wall of China be made by chance. He did an experiment. Now, one thing that needs to be understood is that this experiment was criticized because one of the assumptions that this experiment Miller made was that the atmosphere at that time was mainly ammonia and basically it was mainly ammonia and carbon dioxide.
Excuse me, sorry, you're going completely off the question. I asked, could you explain why there's such genetic similarity between mankind, apes, and further back down the train?
You know, if you look at the genetic similarity between mankind and vegetables, you'll probably see about 60% DNA. That doesn't mean that from bananas. But the point is that we have to look at where did the first things come from.
Actually, we do come from plants. Or we come from a precursor of plants.
Okay, I'll take the last few questions now because we're running quite late. The gentleman there.
In resisting the theory of evolution, I'm not against the rationality of the idea of God. In resisting the theory of evolution, you are trying to say how God made the world. You're falling into the same trap as this gent, going to believe or not believe in God, and then the question is that.
I think with regards to the issue of I think the question was that by refuting the concept of evolution or the theory of evolution, we're falling into the same trap of certain people that talk about there being good and why is therefore evil, or God is good.
Deciding whether they believe in God on the basis of what they think is good or bad, or right or wrong.
Okay. So the question is, the way we understand evolution, I'm not discussing it from the point of view.
So turn the light to the side there.
Perhaps the universe doesn't have a cause after all. Okay, so really, our point of discussion is not really to say whether evolution proves or disproves God. That's not my standpoint here, because we've gone for a proof which negates the need for evolution as a purpose, as a proof for the existence of a creator. Our discussion about evolution is really, is it science or not science? And I want to quote to you Henry G, who is basically the editor of Nature Journal. And he said in his book, The Search of Deep Time, he said, to take a line of fossils and claim that they represent a lineage is not a scientific hypothesis that can be tested, but an assertion that carries the same validity as bedtime stories, amusing, perhaps even instructive, but not scientific. He's an evolutionist. And what's he saying? He's saying it's not actually science in the strict sense of the word science. And that's what I'm saying. It's not science in the strict sense of the word science. What I would suggest for everyone is to actually go and read and understand the basis of evolution for yourself. I'm not here to say evolution is right or wrong. I'm saying that from my understanding, from what I've studied, and from the people that I've read, even they themselves say that it is not on the basis or the level of science, it's on the level of qualitative observation.
Hi. You seem very happy to say that the universe is contingent and dependent, which I'm not sure I agree with for a start. But then you move up one level and talk about this creator who you're certain isn't contingent and dependent. So how do you know that the creator of this universe has those qualities and doesn't have a creator themselves? And then, even if you do know that they're somehow uncontingent, how can you assign qualities to them and call them a god who you would want to worship just based on this?
I'll give you one final example in regards to this, which is the example of a bowl or a plate in which you have an infinite pile of peas on it. Yeah? So imagine this in your mind. You've got a plate and you've got an infinite amount of peas on it. You cut the pile of peas in half. What is each half equal to? Infinity, because when you add it up together, it has to be infinite. When you quarter it, what does each quarter have to add equal to? Infinity. So 1/4 is equal to the whole. And if this is a paradox, it's absurdity. But let's even go further than that. You take 3 peas out of the infinite amount of number of peas. Have you just decreased infinity? If not, where did those peas come from? So therefore it shows, and also it's a fraction, and the fraction is equal to infinity. So therefore it shows that when you add limited things, it means the universe. It means that overall has to be limited. The universe is therefore the sum of all that's limited. Therefore, we say the universe is limited, and then it fits within our premise. In regards to the second question, which is what caused God, in essence. If we say what caused God, is there something other than God that was caused? There's something beyond God as well. Then we fall into the argument of infinite regression, which means we wouldn't be standing here discussing this issue. So there has to be a first point, and that first point has to be independent. And if it's independent, there's nothing caused it. For it to be independent, it has to be other than dependent, which means other than limited. That means that this has to be independent, unlimited, has a will, and has an intelligence.
Look, I'll take the last two questions now.
The whole idea of infinity in mathematics has to be postulated. It's not something that can be proved. It has to be put down as an axiom. And so what you're saying, in effect, is that you want us to believe that God exists as an axiom.
Okay.
Yeah. Could I just respond to that point, though, very quickly? Which is, when we talk about the actual infinites, we are talking about a series of infinity, and that, as my friend would understand, the distinction that David Hilbert made between the potential infinite and the actual infinite. And although we accept the potential infinite as like numbers go on forever, infinity, when he talks about the actual infinite, he's talking about the series of limited things added together that forms infinity.
Well, a lot of people don't accept that there is a potential infinity.
Perhaps. Yeah.
Okay, last two questions now. The gentleman next to the guy is not done.
You both used reason to either argue for or against the existence of a creator, and you both described reason as coming from previous information you have and the decisions you made. I'm sure everyone will agree we don't know everything about the universe, so surely the only reasonable conclusion you can draw is you don't know if there's a creator or not.
I think really the question really is, we don't know everything. Yes, that's true about the natural laws of the universe. But what I do know is that, let's say, for example, before the Big Bang there's a singularity. Before the singularity depended upon the super jelly theory. The super jelly depended upon the super custard theory. If any of those things was limited, then we are saying it's dependent. Because either something depends on limited or unlimited. What we're saying as a Muslim is that it has to be unlimited by rational justification. So even though we may discover some new particles like Higgs-Boson's particles, if it is definable, then it's limited. If it's limited, it's dependent. Yeah? So even though it's a theoretical particle at the moment, even if it is discovered in the future, it still falls within the same framework. And that's why if we said infinite regression can't exist, then there has to be something unlimited out there. Yeah? Or beyond
this question about the creator, it depends on what you mean by a creator, doesn't it? I mean, there are lots of different definitions of what a creator might be. Lots of different theories that can be put forward. It's a question of whether you can test them.
Okay, take the last question now. Gentleman there. Sorry for the people who had the hand up there.
I would like from both of the speakers to say their opinion about one thing. Do they accept that now we have 2004 AC, after Christ, before Christ? What happened 2004 years ago? I mean, do you accept something happened that period? What can they say about that particular thing?
Yes, well, I think the general belief of secularists is based on historical evidence, and the general view of scholars, I think, nowadays is that there is no actual evidence that Jesus existed at the time that he was supposed to have existed. There are no actual contemporary accounts of his doings. Everything that was said about him was written hundreds of years or more afterwards. So it's a question of historical evidence, just the same as any other historical event.
Okay, just to make the last point.
I think for Muslims, we believe that that there was an incident that occurred 2004 years ago, or approximate, because even Christians themselves wouldn't agree with the exact dates. And that we do agree and believe that there was a person called Jesus, and he existed. The question becomes, what is the status of Jesus? Yeah, was he a human being? Was he a prophet, or was he divine, Son of God? And I suppose that's another discussion in itself. For the Muslim, we would say, in order to prove any of those things, whether he's, or the other two things, which is whether he was a prophet or a divine being, you know, or God incarnate, then we would have to have evidence for it, and that evidence has to be tangible. And this is the same criteria and same application we put upon our own faith in terms of Islam and in terms of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. We have to say, if he exists, yeah, how do we know? Secondly, He exists. Is he a prophet as he claimed to be? And for the Muslims, we go through certain ways to test that proof. Like I've gone through a way to test the proof or establish the proof in the existence of the Creator.
The evidence that we have every Easter, the thing that is happening in Jerusalem, do you accept it? About the light? Every Easter in Jerusalem.
Okay, that's the last comment.
I think, if you look at the issue of Easter and did Jesus, was he resurrected at that particular time or not? I remember I was reading a book, and it's a fiction book, but it's based upon a number of propositions, which are certain theories, historical theories. It's by Dan Brown, and it's called Da Vinci Code. And he discusses here that there are theories, and I've seen the documentaries on TV as well, that state that Jesus did not die. That Jesus, in fact, it was an elaborate hoax. Now, obviously, whether that's the case or not, whether that history is right or wrong, we have to now ascertain that through proof. I'm not saying one way or another, but I'm saying we have to establish it. And one of the things that we have to realize is that Christianity has many different strands to it. So you have the Trinitarians, you have the Unitarians, you have the various people that believe that Jesus married Mary Magdalene. Yeah? You have those people that believe that Jesus, he ascended to heaven. Yeah? So we have to understand the various aspects to it in order to sift through what we can then prove and establish as what we would term Iman, meaning decisive belief based upon reality for which we have evidences.
Okay, just like to thank everyone for attending.